Good afternoon. This is Media Center Ukraine, Odesa. We continue for today. Our current guest is Viktor Berestenko, President of the Association of International Freight Forwarders of Ukraine. We are going to discuss with him the transportation sector in Odesa and in Ukraine and how it is affected by the full-scale war that has been ongoing for almost a year and a half. As far as I understand, you have a presentation. Yes, good afternoon. I have a presentation, and first of all, I would like to thank you for focusing on such topics, and secondly, to tell you about who is a freight forwarder, because now we understand how important freight forwarders are. Just a few words about our organization. Our members are around 150 companies that were responsible for 70% of exports from Ukraine. Almost all cargoes are exported and imported by the members of our association. That's why we have the information about how it is ongoing. Who is a freight forwarder? A freight forwarder is an architect of transportation that fully communicates with all the stakeholders, carriers, ports, customs service, state border guard service, and other participants of foreign trade. This is the link that unites all stakeholders and allow us to get foreign currency and also to introduce the goods that are critical for our victory. Now, I would like to dwell upon how the situation has changed during the full-scale war. Around 70% of our export and import potentials were through the ports, which are now blocked. These amounted to $50 billion of the United States dollars, and now we see how it is important for our agri sector. Thanks to the boards, the net price was lower, and our farmers, our agricultural sectors could develop. Unfortunately, this is not the case at the moment. The logistics routes were to the Ukrainian ports, but with the start of this full-scale invasion, the situation has changed, and we have been using the Danube ports. You will get the information about the cargo turnover in those ports later, including the ports of the Baltic countries, Poland, Lithuania. Our Romanian neighbors support us a lot. We have not stopped our activities, we just have changed the routes. So everything now goes through the land border crossing points. Just a bit of numbers about the losses of our logistics sectors. It is very difficult to calculate the precise amount, but this is around $50 billion. As for warehouse infrastructure, before the war, we had around 2.5 warehouses. Around 15% have been destroyed, but this is not without the results of the latest attacks that target warehouses of the Red Cross in particular. So our logistics infrastructure has been damaged a lot. As for the transportation volumes by all types of transport, we can see that there is a twofold decrease from 600 million tons to 318 million tons. And this is the volume of transportation by all means of transportation. We don't have now the air transport. As for the railway transport, from 300 to 1,000 to 150. million ton. Are these numbers about the whole of Ukraine? It is very difficult to have the precise statistics about internal and external markets. We have prepared the statistics basing on the information obtained from the State Statistics Service and the information received from the Ukrainian railways. This is both from Ukraine and into Ukraine. This is the foreign trade of Ukraine. The State Statistics Service does not have information about railway transportation, but we have collated information from the International Automobile Transportation Association, and we can see that the burden is less on the land transport. As for the air transportation, everything's logical here because we don't have now the air transportation. We have only the numbers for the 2 months of the last year. And I hope that our government will understand that it would be that we could use air transportation after the war, and also the transportation through ports. According and when compared to 2022, there is a threefold decrease from 153 to almost 60 million ton. As for the transshipment volumes at our ports, every day we hear information about the Green Corridor, and we can compare the situation. There is almost threefold increase in transshipment of cargoes at the Danube ports, Ismail Reni, and there is a threefold decrease in transshipment of cargoes at the ports of Big Odesa, Uzdonetsk, 1,200%, but you can see that there is increased burden. So the percentage is very high, but this is anyway a small amount. This year, the Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine, now it is called the Ministry of Development and Communities, has announced construction on few facilities along the river to increase transportation volumes to ensure additional transshipment volumes. But we still lack the capacity, the infrastructure, which is around 2.5 times, because the ports of Big Odesa are not operative. We both need warehouse facilities and loading facilities. We should also take into consideration the geography that can be covered by vessels which are loaded at ports of the river. These vessels can reach only nearby points or cities like Istanbul or Egypt. But this limits our foreign trade, and this also limits the access of our cargo to the external market. And because we need to look for customers, for buyers all over the world, and this is also used by our enemy, because they have been destroying our farmers through the limited operations. You will get the presentation, you will get access to these statistics. As for the grain corridor, I would like to speak about the dynamics of the port calls over the last month. And you can see a decrease in these dynamics on a monthly basis. On average, at the start in September last year, the capacity was 6 vessels per day. Now we have only 1.7 vessel per day. We can see a significant decrease now. I believe that the economic profitability. There is no economic profitability for our exporters in use of the grain corridor, because the demurrage is on the shoulders of our suppliers. We have the world price minus logistics and minus our expenses for the cargo delivery. During 24 hours, we need to pay from $10,000 to $25,000 of demurrage, because the vessels should wait for 30-60 days on entry and exit. But this allows us to keep the turnover. What turnover? It also allows us to export, and we need to understand that we have grain, but we do not know what to do with this. There is a market, but we cannot export our grain. At the western border, we have physical limitations. And physically, we cannot increase our export. Because, for example, when it comes to rail transportation, we are limited there. I have information about our export on a daily basis. And now there are limitations with the European countries, and our export has decreased in 2.5 times. On average, in May, we had 391,000 of grains by rail, well, to the ports 241,000 tons, and through the border crossing points 150,000 tons. So this is a twofold decrease compared to the standard situation. For example, what we had in April. In April, there were 2.5 million tons of export using railway transportation. If the trend is kept, we will be able to export only 1.2 million tons by the railway transport. The same can be said about the capacity, which is measured as an average amount of wagons with grain crossing the border. For example, at border crossing points with Poland and Hungary. In March, we had 58 wagons per 24 hours. In March, in April, 28, and now we have 14 wagons across the border. We are limited now with our transit experts through the European country. Then they started lifting that limitations. They allowed the transit. But the mechanism of the transit has become even more complicated. So now there is a decrease from 28 wagons to 14 wagons. This information can be found on the website of the Ukrainian Railways Company. Coming back to our presentation, I would like to speak briefly about the reasons of such situation. Perhaps this is due to the fact that our government has missed something. We overloaded the European grain market, and yesterday or the day before yesterday, the president said that European farmers could be used by someone for manipulations and for the blockage of our grain. Yesterday, one of the BCPs with Poland was blocked by the Polish carriers. The Ukrainian transit and import were too high, and now the director of the World Food Program of the UN at Brussels decided that they will buy the remaining the part of the European grain. And our government has been working hard to renew these supply chains. As for the grain corridor, I can show you the graphs. And with the number of vessels starting from the 1st April. According to the official information, according to the Black Sea News, and I'm not sure that the mass media have covered this topic about the passage of vessels, but from the 9th of May till today, there has been no passage of vessels through the grain corridor. No inspection has been done through over this period. We are waiting for the new agreement to be achieved with regard to the function of the corridor. The expiry date is 16 or 18 of May. But you can see what they do now. Everyone understands that the Russian party just does not examine the vessels. There is no logic in this. There is no reason for this. But I believe they do everything possible to block the functioning of these tools. And full stop here, because they can see that the grain is supplied to Europe, and there are protests in Europe, and this is now becomes a political issue. We can move on with the presentation. Sorry, but I would like to come back to the issue. The expiry date of the agreement is 18th of May, and the government says that perhaps there will be the end date of the agreement. What are the conditions, how do you think, for the Ukrainian businesses? We will have the same situation as we had before the start of the grain corridor. There will be the overloading of our infrastructure. We will have grain unused, like remaining grain, and our colleagues say that around 50 million tons of grain should be exported. How it will be, I don't know. The Ukrainian Seaports Authority says that the transshipment of all cargo through the seaport was at the level of 59 million tons with the significant amount of grains. Which will be a blockage. So the enemy tries to deteriorate the situation. There is, I, as the producer of grain, does not see any sense in exporting through the grain corridor because this is very costly for me. That's why I'm looking for other ports in Poland, Germany, Romania. I'm trying to do this through the Danube river because the expenses for the transportation are more than I can earn. So we had to wait at the border for about 20 days when it came to land border crossing points. So the Russian logic is now as following. They try to increase the waiting times, and it proves to be successful. Ukrainian businesses have switched to other corridors, and that has led to the process in European producers and European carriers. We can see now the situation in Poland. If the agreement is not prolonged, then we will not have the green corridor, and we will see even bigger losses than now. So we can expect spoilage of grains in the future, but we hope that such international organizations, the UN, will do something to solve the issue, not only declare their readiness. Hopefully, I was able to answer your question. Now, a few words about the customs service and the state border guard service. According to the information of members of our associations, there are no complaints about the activities of the state border guard service of Ukraine. So there were some complaints at the beginning of the full-scale invasion in February, in March last year. There were some organizational issues about who can cross the border, etc. And the main question here is a carrier. The carrier are allowed to cross the border using the Shlyah or route way system. As for the activities of the state customs service, you can see the information on the slide. I believe that in our country there is no institution of the state customs service. I think that we should say that the customs service is a unit or department within the state security service of the national police or the Bureau of Economic Security, etc., because every customs officer cannot process the customs declaration without receiving agreement through some messenger. We can say this almost about all customs officers at any customs house. Every time we receive information about corruption, about scandals, detentions, but if we scrutinize the cases, if we look at who is detained, then usually this is a customs inspector, a customs official, that officer that cannot define the policy. In our state, there is no person responsible for the reform of the customs in Ukraine. So the customs service institution seems to be established in Ukraine by our enemy, because the head of the customs service is elected through the contents, but is approved by the cabinet of ministers. The deputy head of the customs service is agreed by the cabinet of ministers of Ukraine. The heads of the customs houses are appointed by the Ministry of Finance of Ukraine. The heads of customs posts are appointed by the head of the state customs service and not by the head of the customs. As for our law enforcement, we support a lot of officers, the National Guard of Ukraine, the Army of Ukraine, and we also are involved in defending our country. We donate drones, we donate money, and we can see how the law enforcement officers who were involved in Maidan activities try to get money from different companies. So now you can see the information about the operation of the State Customs Service. The law enforcement body usually sends kind of a letter to the Customs Service informing about possible examination. Now we have the issue with queues at the border, and our law enforcement bodies make these problems even more difficult. So they kind of block customs examination at the border. As for the statistics of customs examination, initiated by the law enforcement bodies for all customs houses, you can see that Odesa Customs House, that covers only 3 ports at the Danube River and Green Corridor, has around 60% of examinations following the order of law enforcement bodies. I don't know the reason for this. Here you can see what orders are received from the different bodies. 70% received from the Bureau of Economic Safety, the body which shall be responsible for the economic security of our country. We can also see here the National Police Security Service and the Prosecutor's Office. As for amount of investigations, you can see 42% of the State Investigation Body Bureau and the Bureau of the Economic Security. The biggest amount of examinations are initiated by the Bureau of the Economic Security. This information was presented on the previous slide, but there is zero protocols concluded basing on the results of this examination. There is the corruption element when it comes to the Green Corridor, which is controlled by these bodies. I have the information that, unfortunately, the State Food Service requires bribes to expedite the process of issuing phytosanitary certificates and Bureau of the Economic Security not to send letters to block customs examination. How does it work? For example, the vessel is loaded, but a vessel cannot leave the port because of the Bureau of the Economic Security. That was to solve the issue. It was 4% of the agreement price, and this continues during the war. I would like to bring your attention to this. These numbers are terrible. Over the last year, there were around 1,000 orders received by the State Customs Service. This year, they received 2,500 services. And if you remember, last year, the head of the Odesa Customs House was fired because of the scandal at the Green Corridor, and the next head was Mr. Berestenko was fired at the end of the previous year. The reason was the same, the corruption at the Green Corridor. And I am afraid that the current head will be also fired for that. Also, these people may not even have been involved in those corruption activities. the official was it the official reason for firing? Were there any investigations, criminal proceedings? There are some official data on the official websites of the Bureau for the Economic Security and other institutions. So they like catch the trespassers, the criminals, but we don't know what is the way forward. Because they change people, but the scheme is operative. We have addressed the office of the president, the cabinet of ministers of Ukraine, because our vessels should wait for weeks and months for the examination by the by Russians. We cannot wait even longer to get a decision of the Economic Security Bureau. Here you can find information about the protocols about violation of customs rules. You can see the results of the consideration of these protocols at courts. 50% for business and 20% for customs. And the next one, the post-court activities. So this is the quality indicators for the customs service. These are the same indicators as the activities of law enforcement bodies. And for other violations of customs rules, the numbers are even worse. In 80%, the business is acknowledged right by the courts. So the customs service, they perhaps are involved in drafting wrong protocols. These are open data. One more indicator. When our customs service says to us that we have the plan, that we have the revenue and taxes for billion hryvnias. Customs defined the amount for business to pay taxes. There is the decree of the Cabinet of Ministers to define the value of goods at export. For example, I buy goods for 1,000 United States dollars, and I have to pay 20% of VAT. Customs makes me pay not 200 USD, but 400 USD. Then I address the court with the complaint, and in 92%, businesses win these cases. So what is the final result? Businesses get this money from the state, and the revenues which are declared by the state customs service is not true, because this money is spent for courts, etc. As for Odesa, customs has 99% of in 99% of cases in court proceedings, our businesses win. And all these protocols, all these adjustments of customs value prevent our activities and delay border crossing. And 20 million hryvnias, this is the court fees. How much money is returned to our companies from the state customs service? This is closed information, but this information can be found in court registers. This is like no. This is, I mean, the amount of money. Is it in a kind of economic secret? We were not able to find these numbers, and we should address the state customs service, but they are not very open. Do you have any questions about the work of the state customs service? If there are no questions, I would like to continue. I would like now to speak about mobilization of the private transportation for a defense union. It used to be a quite significant issue, and the members of our associations provided their transport. And as far as I know, you also donated your vehicle. We bought 30 more vehicles, but the question is about about trucks now. So our law enforcement bodies were not that effective as our military. And so this is the question about thefts of vehicles from the territory of the Black Sea ports at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. There were around 1,300 vehicles on the territory of the terminal at the port. The governor, back then Krynevetsky, made a decision that those vehicles should be donated to our defense units. And law enforcement bodies even argued who can take these cars. The head of the Black Sea port self-eliminated, and now the investigation by the State Investigation Bureau with regard to illegal activities of the vehicles that seized those vehicles, and also the head of the Black Sea port. This is the only case that our members have faced with regard to illegal use of vehicles. There were different cars like Hyundai, Toyota. There were motor cars. No one knows how those cars were used. As for mobilization, there is the task of territorial bodies, of the military commissariats, and there is no issue with forcible appropriation of vehicles, with forced appropriation of vehicles. How our government solves the issue at the border? There is the Shlyah system that allows a driver to cross the border. There are some abuses by some drivers. There are some illegal schemes and investigations ongoing. But in general, the system is very effective. We have the numbers about the amount of permission, about how many people leave, how many people left, how many people returned. There is the question to criteria of including drivers to the system, because the main abuse was not by the business, but by the authorities who can introduce different people to the system. You've also heard and know that the state regional administration in Ternopil and Volhynia oblasts were involved in issuing illegal permissions within the system for people to cross the border. As for the EQ system, it was introduced on the 12th of December. Business was quite skeptical about the system. There were the issue about the price, about the administration of the system, but this is a significant breakthrough. This is a unique system that was developed by our Ministry of Infrastructure with the support of USAID. At the moment, as of May, around 75,000 trucks have used the system, and around 30,000 of drivers. The numbers are increasing because the system is now introduced at other border crossing points. What does it allow? This is the same to the service centers, where it is your time to approach the window. For example, you can see a long queue and you can wait for 3 days at the border. You don't spend your time. So you organize your activities to cross the border during one day, because you know and trace the electronic queue. This simplifies the life of our drivers and helps to save time, which is a significant deficit not only at our market but at the world market. As for the staff, a lot of people have left, and now is the question who will renew the transportation, who will organize the process. It is quite difficult to find people for that. And according to the new legislation, we cannot create a pool of these people. People are mobilized. Some people have left abroad. And there is increased traumas at the enterprises who are involved in transshipment and transportation of cargoes. The members of our association cannot use their fleet of transport because there is a lack of drivers. So this is the question of who will be involved in recovery of the system. Some of them have been mobilized, others have left abroad at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And as for the percent, you can now say now that there is a lack of staff. This is quite a subjective factor, but it is at least at the level of 15–20%. And you are now talking about the members of your association, not only about members. You can address to the Association of Rail Transport, and they can provide more information. But this is the general amount. So there is a lack of at least the level of at least 15%. What our government has been doing to improve the situation, we have the recovery agency, which is headed by Mustafa Nayem. And finally, they started introducing proper things. They started developing border crossing points and to organize joint control. When our cargos and our citizens are cleared once, together with our counterparts on the other side of the border. And the joint control simplifies the situation a lot, and we have chances to become a well-developed country in this area. Hopefully, I was able to answer all of your questions. Do you have any additional questions? Actually, we plan to spend 40 minutes with you. Thank you very much for your time. And I would like to add that sometimes journalists address us because they want to write stories about transportation and logistics in Ukraine. And I think that Viktor is quite an interesting person for journalists to communicate, to share the view of the Ukrainian business and what has been going on in Ukraine because of the full-scale invasion of Russia that started almost a year and a half ago. Viktor Berestenko, thank you very much for your time. Please stay tuned.